The rabbit sat motionless in the corner of the concrete enclosure, pressed so tightly against the wall that her body seemed to merge with the shadows. No one had heard her make a sound in the 3 weeks since she'd arrived at the overcrowded municipal shelter. Not a thump, not a squeak, not even the soft grinding of teeth that rabbits use to express contentment or pain. Just silence, heavy and unbroken, wrapping around her like a second skin she couldn't shed. Maria, a volunteer who came twice a week to help with the small animal wing, noticed her during an evening shift. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh angles across the rows of wire cages, but this rabbit occupied the darkest corner of her space, as far from the light as the enclosure would allow. Her fur was a muted gray, patchy in places where stress had caused it to thin, and her eyes held a distant, glassy quality that spoke of something deeper than fear. It was resignation, the kind that settles in when hope has been absent too long. Maria knelt slowly, keeping her movements gentle and predictable. She had worked with frightened animals before, understood the language of patience and the importance of not rushing trust. But when she extended her hand toward the cage, the rabbit didn't react at all. No flinch, no retreat, no acknowledgement. She simply stared through the wire mesh as if Maria weren't there, as if nothing in the world could reach her anymore. The shelter records offered little insight. The rabbit had been surrendered by an elderly owner who could no longer care for her. No name, no history, just a note scrawled in fading ink that read, "Quiet. Doesn't cause trouble." Maria read those words again, feeling the weight they carried. Quiet wasn't always a virtue. Sometimes it was a warning sign, a red flag waving in a language most people didn't bother to learn. Over the following days, Maria made it her mission to understand this silent rabbit. She brought fresh vegetables, placing them carefully near the front of the cage where the rabbit could reach them without effort. The food went untouched for hours, sometimes days, until hunger finally overrode whatever invisible barrier kept the rabbit frozen in place. Even then, she ate only when no one was watching, consuming just enough to survive but never enough to thrive. Maria tried everything she could think of. She sat beside the cage reading aloud, her voice low and soothing, hoping the steady rhythm of words might offer comfort. She brought soft blankets, arranging them in the corner where the rabbit preferred to hide. She adjusted the lighting, angling it away from the enclosure to create a gentler environment. Nothing changed. The rabbit remained a statue, existing but not living, breathing but not engaging with the world around her. Then one afternoon, Maria made a decision that would alter both their lives. She couldn't leave the rabbit in this limbo, couldn't watch her fade further into herself with each passing day. The shelter was overcrowded, resources stretched thin, and animals who didn't show adoption potential rarely stayed long. Maria filled out the foster application that same evening, her handwriting steady despite the uncertainty churning in her chest. She had fostered before, but never an animal this withdrawn, this unreachable. The rabbit arrived at Maria's small apartment wrapped in a towel, her body rigid with tension. Maria had prepared a large pen in the corner of her living room, away from the windows and the noise of the street below. She lined it with soft bedding, added a covered hideaway, placed water and food within easy reach. When she gently set the rabbit down inside, the animal immediately retreated to the darkest corner of the hideaway, disappearing from view. For 3 days, Maria saw her only in glimpses. A flash of gray fur when she refilled the water bowl. The evidence of nibbled hay in the early morning. But no interaction, no curiosity, no sign that the rabbit understood she was safe now. Maria began to wonder if she had made a mistake, if some wounds ran too deep to heal, if this rabbit would spend the rest of her days trapped in whatever prison her mind had built. On the 4th morning, Maria woke to find her other rabbit, Chester, sitting outside the pen. Chester was everything this nameless rabbit wasn't: bold, curious, social, with a personality that filled every room he entered. He was a large Flemish giant with warm brown fur and eyes that sparkled with mischief and confidence. Maria had adopted him 2 years earlier, and he had the run of the apartment, hopping freely from room to room like he owned the place. Now he sat perfectly still, his nose pressed against the pen's wire panels, staring intently at the hideaway where the gray rabbit remained hidden. Maria watched, holding her breath, waiting to see what would happen. Chester didn't move. He simply sat there, patient and present, as if he understood something Maria couldn't see. Minutes passed. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, a small gray nose emerged from the hideaway. The rabbit inched forward, her body low to the ground, every muscle tensed for retreat. She stopped just inside the entrance, close enough to see Chester but ready to vanish at the first sign of threat. Chester still didn't move. He blinked once, slowly, his ears relaxed and tilted forward in a gesture of gentle curiosity. The gray rabbit took another step. Then another. Until she reached the wire panel that separated them. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, two rabbits from different worlds meeting across a barrier that was both physical and invisible. Then Chester did something that made Maria's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. He lowered his head and pressed it gently against the wire, offering the universal rabbit gesture of trust and affection. The gray rabbit hesitated. Her ears twitched, processing this new information, this strange kindness she hadn't experienced in longer than anyone knew. Then, with a movement so tentative it was barely there, she touched her nose to Chester's through the wire. It lasted only a second before she pulled back, retreating a few inches, but it was enough. It was a beginning. From that moment, everything shifted. Chester became a constant presence outside the pen, spending hours each day sitting beside it, occasionally grooming himself or munching hay, but always there, always steady. The gray rabbit began emerging from her hideaway more frequently, drawn by the quiet companionship Chester offered without demanding anything in return. She started eating more regularly, her movements becoming slightly less rigid, though she still flinched at sudden sounds and never ventured far from her safe corner. After a week of this careful dance, Maria made another decision. She opened the pen door, creating a passage between the gray rabbit's protected space and the larger world of the apartment. Chester sat a few feet away, watching with patient interest. The gray rabbit appeared at the opening, her nose twitching as she tested the air, processing the enormity of this new freedom. She didn't step out that day, or the next. But on the third day, when the apartment was quiet and the afternoon sun created warm patches on the carpet, she finally crossed the threshold. Her movements were slow, calculated, every hop deliberate and measured. Chester remained where he was, giving her space to explore on her own terms. She made it 3 feet before the sound of a car horn outside sent her racing back to the safety of the pen, disappearing into her hideaway so quickly Maria barely saw her move. But she had ventured out. And the next day, she did it again, going a little farther this time. Each day brought small progress, tiny victories that might seem insignificant to anyone who hadn't witnessed the depth of her fear. A hop toward the water bowl outside the pen. A moment spent investigating a patch of sunlight. The briefest pause to sniff a toy Chester had left nearby. Through it all, Chester maintained his role as silent guardian and gentle guide. He never rushed her, never invaded her space, never demanded interaction she wasn't ready to give. He simply existed alongside her, demonstrating through his own calm confidence that the world could be navigated safely, that not everything was a threat, that life could be more than hiding and surviving. Weeks passed, and the transformation, though gradual, became undeniable. The gray rabbit began spending more time outside the pen than inside it. Her fur grew back where stress had thinned it, revealing a coat that was actually quite beautiful when healthy. Her eyes lost some of their glassy distance, replaced by a cautious awareness that suggested she was finally present in her own life. She still startled easily, still retreated when overwhelmed, but the retreats became shorter, the recoveries quicker. The breakthrough came on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Maria sat on the floor reading, Chester sprawled beside her in his usual relaxed manner. The gray rabbit had been exploring the far corner of the room, investigating the space behind a bookshelf. Maria heard the soft sound of hopping and looked up to see the rabbit approaching, moving with more confidence than ever before. She hopped past Chester, paused briefly to touch her nose to his ear, then continued forward until she reached Maria's outstretched leg. For a moment, she simply sat there, her small body pressed against Maria's knee. Then, in a gesture that brought tears to Maria's eyes, the rabbit settled down completely, tucking her paws beneath her in the relaxed position rabbits only assume when they feel truly safe. Maria didn't move, barely breathed, afraid that any reaction might shatter this fragile moment of trust. Chester lifted his head, looked at the gray rabbit, then at Maria, and if a rabbit could smile, Maria would have sworn he did. That night, Maria finally gave her a name. Luna, for the way she had lived in shadows and was only now beginning to emerge into the light. It felt right, felt like an acknowledgement of both who she had been and who she was becoming. When Maria whispered the name aloud, Luna's ear twitched in response, the first time she had reacted to a human voice with anything other than fear. The bond between Luna and Chester deepened into something remarkable. They became inseparable, moving through the apartment in a synchronized rhythm that spoke of profound understanding. Chester would groom Luna's ears with gentle persistence, and slowly, hesitantly, she began to return the gesture. When Chester flopped onto his side in a dramatic display of contentment, Luna would settle nearby, not quite touching but close enough to share his warmth. At night, they slept side by side in the large pen Maria had converted into a shared space, their breathing synchronized in the darkness. But it was Chester's courage that truly changed Luna's story. He taught her, through patient example, that the world held more than fear. When the doorbell rang, Chester would hop calmly toward the sound, showing her that sudden noises didn't always mean danger. When Maria moved furniture or brought in grocery bags, Chester investigated with cheerful curiosity, demonstrating that change could be interesting rather than threatening. Slowly, Luna began to mirror his responses, her fear gradually replaced by cautious curiosity. 6 months after Luna arrived, Maria sat on her living room floor watching both rabbits play with a cardboard box. Chester had claimed the top, perched like a king surveying his domain, while Luna explored the inside, occasionally poking her head out to check her surroundings. The transformation was complete in some ways, ongoing in others. Luna would never be as bold as Chester, would always carry the scars of whatever had broken her trust so thoroughly. But she was no longer that frozen, silent creature in the corner of a shelter cage. She was alive in ways that mattered, engaged with her world, capable of joy and connection and trust. The real gift, Maria realized, wasn't that she had saved Luna. It was that Luna had found Chester, and Chester had understood exactly what she needed. One courageous rabbit who refused to let another remain lost in solitude. Who showed up day after day with patient presence and gentle persistence until the walls came down and life became possible again. Luna still preferred quiet spaces and gentle movements. She still retreated when overwhelmed, still carried caution in every hop. But now she also knew comfort, companionship, and the profound relief of being seen and accepted exactly as she was. She had learned that silence didn't have to mean isolation, that vulnerability could lead to connection, that even the most broken trust could be slowly, carefully rebuilt. And Chester, wise and patient Chester, continued being exactly what he had always been, a steady presence, a gentle guide, a friend who asked for nothing but offered everything. Together, they created a language that transcended words, a bond built on understanding and acceptance and the simple act of showing up, day after day, until hope became possible again.